Hello people, Master Procrastinator here, ready to finally make another video, the first one of 2019. So welcome to my first video for this year, which is going to be another spot review. This time we will talk about the Tshira Ruins area and try to figure out, probably together, even though I already know the values, what this spot is worth in terms of experience, skill experience and money per hour values, of course from my level 61 wizard's perspective. That being said, well, let's get started. In terms of my wizard stats, I'm going to just reuse the same clip that I already used 3 times by now, just because nothing much really changed in terms of my gear and stuff like that, at least for this video in particular. So these are my stats, my pets and so on. This time I really have to mention what I forgot in the previous 3 videos, which is how I grind, and I realized a couple of days ago that it's very important. When I grind, I pretty much set my pets on agile mode so they can loot as fast as possible, but I don't manually loot anything from the ground. So basically whatever I get in terms of items is just purely from my pets, while I myself try to grind as fast as possible, or as fast as I could possibly grind while watching Netflix in the background. So it's a somewhat important detail, because obviously if you loot manually you will get less experience per hour since you will grind slower, but in return you will get more drops and the money per hour value will be higher. So just as a constant thing, you know, something that doesn't change, I will always grind this way for this series, and that's why I figured it's worth mentioning. So now, before we get into the data, there's the rotation issue, which I have to mention. In this area, I can say I'm pretty much a fan of not investing in nodes. So for this Tshira Ruins spot, again, my node level is 0. I don't really bother to invest in them because I don't see the value. If the drop rate change is way too small. The rotations, I believe this spot has maybe 2 or maximum 3 useful rotations that you could make, just because the swamp seems to be splittable, I suppose, in left and right side. I'm pretty much using the, at least from my perspective, the right side of the swamp to make a huge circle around it, and that's pretty much the rotation that I was using. I'm fairly certain that you can make the rotation smaller, because the respawn time for monsters is quite small. It's probably the same 1.5 minutes or so that is at Sosans, so you can make a shorter rotation, you know, a smaller one, but in my case I just didn't bother to change it, because you know how it goes. I find an area that I didn't grind before, in this case Tshira Ruins. I circle around it for an hour or 2 until I settle for a certain rotation, and if I don't have any troubles with said rotation, I don't have any reason to change it. So that's why the rotation is the one that you see on the screen, which is probably going to take a while to show, so that's why I'm trying to figure out stuff to mention in this time, just to not be that quiet. Let's see, some of the stuff, the rotation doesn't seem to be very populated. This entire test was done about 2 weeks ago or so, basically before the holidays and around the time when people were leveling up their archers. So I would consider this spot to be somewhat close or comparable to something like Fogans or Nagas. So a lot of people may come here to level up their 58 characters or so. So I did encounter at that time a couple of archers and people, but in general I wouldn't say this area is very populated, maybe because over time people realized that the money per hour value here is not exactly amazing. So because of that, I can say the spot is somewhat populated, but with my rotation, this one, I think I only had to switch channels in the 10 hours grinded here, maybe 3 or 4 times in total, which doesn't seem like a huge issue. Basically, compared to something like bandits, I never had the need or felt the need to initiate in PK or duel someone over the spot just because it was contested. By now the rotation should be done playing, so let's get into the data. This time I'm not going to get too much in detail with what happened during the 10.5 hours, because pretty much nothing much happened. I got 0 rings, I pretty bad luck, I suppose. I didn't get a single ring, but then again I talked with a guildie, actually a couple of them, and from what I understand you can even go 20 hours here without getting a ring, so the drop rate seems to be pretty low on that aspect, and I only got 1 crystal in the 10 hours here. I will just mention the times will be on the screen, again as usual, along with the screenshots if you want to check them out individually, but basically what you can take out of this small overview, I suppose, is that on my first run, the first 53 minutes, I was just searching for the rotation, so it was a very unoptimized type of grinding. Again, that means my grinding speed was slower, and so was my trash per hour. It's worth mentioning. Around the half of the test, after run or session number 6 basically, I decided to do one session on my Valkyrie as well, just because, as I mentioned previously, I believe this spot is somewhat comparable to maybe Fogan's or Naga's, so I decided why not put all of my gear on my 58 Valk, and having over 210 AP with a Kutum, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it turned out to actually be. So in this 1 hour on my Valk, I got about 5.2 thousand trash per hour in terms of speed, how much my pets were able to loot. And if you compare this to my wizard had an average of 7 to 7.5 thousand trash per hour, so my Valk was, let's say, about 30% slower in terms of speed. Still, I'm going to be using this 1 hour, I'm just mentioning that, the Valk grind was slower. After this, I continued grinding on my wizard, because it's the faster character, and just to keep the consistency going. After session number 10, I just got bored of the spot, just because I had bad luck with rare drops, and I just felt like moving on. So in total we have 10 hours and 27 minutes of grind time, excluding all of the repair times and stuff like that. I should also mention that here you can pick up dailies from the node manager, which is really close to where I park my horse, basically exactly where I put it. So if you grind here maybe 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day, it is worth picking up these dailies because the rewards are quite decent. I believe in the 10 hours I only did the dailies 3 times, so not really a lot, but they still, add up to the money per hour value. That being said, as I mentioned, not much happened. So the trash per hour value, I basically tried to keep track of what I got on every single session, and I converted those values to per hour values, even though the individual sessions were not 1 hour each. Basically, on average, I got about 7,000 trash per hour, including everything, the Valk run as well, so probably on my wizard, if I exclude the first run, which was a slow one, and the Valk one, it's probably around 7.5 thousand trash per hour on average. For the money stones, again, like on the previous video, I keep forgetting to pick them up, so I only bought money stones for the second half of the test, and I have 5 runs. Out of those 5, the average was 4,972 monsters killed per hour, so let's say about 5,000 monsters killed per hour on my wizard average. With these values, now we can talk about the experience and skill experience. For the sake of it, I will mention now, even though I grinded on my Valk 1 hour, that was just simply, to see what happens if I use a level 58 character. I did not test experience or stuff like that on my Valk. This is just purely talking about what my 61 wizard got, and it is worth mentioning that my wizard pretty much one-shots the packs, has huge AoEs, so maybe even if a Valk would be level 61, it would still probably grind slower than my wizard, just because wizard one-shots the packs, and this area having a lot of monsters, you can pretty much get to the conclusion yourself, I kill faster. So the experience, I have 3 runs in which the values were consistent, but basically the buffs were not fluctuating, converting those runs to per hour values and getting the buffs back down to a base of 100%. I got on average from the 3 runs about 0.086% experience per hour from the monsters, and 1 skill point level up and 54% skill experience per hour. I'm starting to lose myself in my own words. So yeah, the Marnie Stones, again, I have that 5000 monsters per hour, or almost average, and using that one, basically I had one run where I turned in a lot of Marnie Stones, and out of those turn-ins I figured out how much you get per each monster, and that results in 0.447% experience per hour from Marnie Stones, which, if you are up to date with my previous videos, you know this is much higher than what you can get at the Wolves area and at the Necropolis area, so this area is highly carried by the Marnie Stone value in terms of experience. It's pretty obvious though, because you kill a lot of monsters, 5000 of them per hour, it kind of makes sense that you fill Marnie Stones faster and you get much more experience as a result. The experience from the monsters themselves is still higher than the Wolves area, but it's in between Wolves and Necro. So the monster experience itself is not bad on its own, but the Marnie Stone actually carries this place. That being said, how does this place stack up at 350% rate? I think I'm going to make this a custom, just use it on every single spot review. What happens if I have exactly 350% experience rate using buffs? Where should I grind with that? Let's again compare this spot to something like Mirumok Ruins, which people say it has good experience. Doing that, Marnie Stones obviously don't scale with experience buffs, but here you would get about 0.750% experience per hour, while at Mirumok Ruins you get 0.675. So the conclusion, if you can only get around 350 or 400% experience rate, this spot is better than Mirumok Ruins, which means the experience here is actually very good. And the skill experience, for this one I checked one of my older videos, and by that I actually mean really old video, where basically the skill experience series that I did a long time ago. It turns out this area is pretty much identical or very close to the Gahaz Bandits area in terms of skill experience. So conclusion, very good skill experience, very good normal experience, and now let's move on into the money per hour values. The money per hour value is a little bit weird. I don't know how to put it in a way, because for this series I would like to just simply include everything that I get, since it's my own experience with the spot, not what you could get out of it. So in my 10 hours grinded I got 0 rings, which means the value is going to be pretty low compared to someone who may grind here 5 hours and get 2 rings and have 40 millions per hour. In my case, again, stamping a value on everything as if you would sell it all to the marketplace just to assess a value to a spot, I got on average, I got about 18.4 millions per hour if you sell everything to the marketplace. This seems to be kind of bad, and in a way it is. I mean, I talked with my guildies, and I'm not sure if I already mentioned this in the video, but basically some people said that they grinded here 20 hours and got no rings at all, or 15 hours. So I would assume the ring drop rate here is very low, not as high as the Necro belt drop, for example, and getting only 1 crystal drop in this time turns out, less than 20 millions per hour. I would say this spot is somewhat average. I mean, if you get lucky with the ring, you can break the 25 millions per hour mark, but if you don't, it's this bad. By the way, I used the maximum value for the Blackstone weapons just because I did the math about 1 or 2 weeks ago, but this doesn't really influence the money per hour value much, because I only got 12 weapon stones in 10 hours, so it's not a huge deal. Maybe you could get 18.2 on average with the current prices or stuff like that. Also, the new marketplace system is going to come out really soon, so with the new marketplace prices, I'm pretty sure they will change a little bit. You may have to take 5 minutes of your time, use this loot table and redo the math to get more accurate values. But with the current ones from about a week ago, this is what I got. Now we go to the last point of the video, which is the ranking and me giving my own thoughts about this area. In my opinion, Tshira Ruins is a pretty good spot. The only issue that I have with it is the low drop rate for the rings. The experience rate, I gave it an A+, because I can't give it a maximum value since I'm pretty sure I will find better spots with more, experience values, maybe Fogans or Nagas, I'm not sure, but it is still a very good experience per hour value. The skill experience one, pretty much the same, A+, because I have my old chart from that skill experience series where I know for sure that this area has pretty much identical rates to bandits, so it's very good in terms of skill experience. And for money, I would say B, just an average spot. If you get a ring, it is probably above average a little bit, but anything under 20 millions per hour is not amazing. For convenience, just B+, because the spot is not exactly very close to a city, but in the same time you don't take a lot of damage. In fact, you barely take any damage. Your weapons break really slowly, so you can grind here maybe even 4 hours without having to repair. You can just overstack the main trash item on the horse. At one point I was even using my storage maids to move trash items into the bank, so in terms of convenience, it's not a bad spot. You don't really see a lot of people, or at least I didn't see a lot of people, and since there is no problems with PKing or people griefing your spot or stuff like that, it seems to be a pretty decent area. In fact, I could actually give it more than B+, maybe A for convenience. It's actually a pretty good spot in terms of that, but I'm just going to go with what I wrote in my notes. So that being said, I can already see I made this video maybe 20 minutes long, which is not good, so let me end it here. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I gave you some insight of what you can expect out of this area. In my opinion, it's a very good spot if you want to level up. The experience and skill experience is really good. The only problems that I personally have with this area is that like all of the other Dragon spots, it has no scrolls, so you kind of have to rely on the crystal drops and the ring drops to get any useful money per hour values out of it. So as usual, like the video if you enjoyed it, leave a comment if you want to add something to the topic. I pretty much always forget to mention stuff, I'm only human, so if you notice something that I forgot to mention, just leave a comment. Most people will benefit from the extra information, and I guess subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. Until next time, stay happy, keep playing Black Desert, and yeah, bye bye. I hope you're doing well with your New Year's resolutions, and yeah, bye. Now that the video is over and the outro is probably playing, I can say that in between this video and the next spot review, I pretty much AFK'd so much and I used the training books so much that I got my wizard to level 62, so the next spot review is going to be done on my ranger. And here is a sneak peek of the area that I was grinding or am still grinding.